The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views and positions of the agency.
Welcome to DYCD Next Gen. Once again, I'm your host, Ryan Cooks, and our monthly podcast features the very latest on everything DYCD has to offer, and we go right to the heart of the story, speaking to young people and New Yorkers about the issues they face in their daily lives. Today, we are joined by our new commissioner, Sandra Escamilla-Davies, to talk about her upbringing, career, and her path to becoming a social worker. Commissioner, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Ryan. I'm super excited to be here.
First of all, take us back, to the beginning. What was your upbringing like, and how did the community you grew up in shape who you are today?
Yeah. So I'm not sure what the beginning is, but I will start by saying that I am the daughter of Ismael and Nubia Escamilla. My mother is one of 12, and my father is one of 8. And so I have 50 first cousins, if you can imagine. Yeah, 50 first cousins. My parents met in Colombia. My father's from Barranquilla, and my mother is from Palmira. And my grandparents on my father's side, my grandmother, she's from Lebanon.
Wow.
So yeah, there's on the coast of Colombia, there are a lot of Arabs. And so my grandmother's from Beirut, Lebanon. And that's important because that shaped me as well. But when my parents met and they got married, they had 4 children, and my dad, he was the oldest in his family, and my mother was one of the oldest in her family. So they were very serious about leaving their homes because they were responsible for all their brothers and sisters. And they were like, we're getting out of here. And I mean that in a good way. But they really wanted to form their own families. And so when my parents were in Colombia, they had 2 children, my older brother and sister, and then they came to the United States and they had me and my middle sister. And so we were always kind of between these 2 worlds, right? Kind of going back and forth from Colombia to the United States. And specifically, I think my parents, what I want to highlight is that my parents were the first to come to the United States of their respective families. And because they decided to come and they moved to Queens, Woodside in Queens, all of my aunts and uncles came afterwards, and all of their families came here afterwards as well. So my house, I grew up in a house where people were coming in and out and forming community. So my father worked as a machinist and my mother was home with us, but they really saw it as important that they came here to build a better life for themselves, to have kids that could then go to college and really reap the benefits of the United States. And they wanted all of their family to come. So I have memories of, my cousins coming or my aunts and uncles coming and staying in our house for an extended period of time until they got on their feet, and then their children would come and then they would move out. So it was a beautiful hub of folks coming through to really make a better life for themselves.
Your parents kind of started like a trend there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing that's really important about that is that they made a decision that was part of giving back, right? And so I grew up really understanding that when my cousins came to my house or my aunts came to my house, that we were responsible for helping them transition in one way or the other. Whether it be through our support or whether it be through resources, but that we were supposed to do that because that's what you did. And then I also kind of had this moment where my parents, because they were trying to kind of adjust to living in the United States, they also felt it really important for me to hold my identity as a Latina. So there were people who came in. My father came in 1964. There were some people who had to assimilate, for reasons of it was dangerous to speak Spanish, or they wanted to figure out how to assimilate so that they could be treated fairly.
Right.
And my parents were very clear. Nope, we spoke English and Spanish. My last name was Escamilla, not Escamilla, and my name was Sandra, not Sandra or Sandra. And if you can't roll your eyes, I'm fine with that. But this identity of building community, but also being really proud of where I came from, happened early on in my life, with my parents being the anchors of both.
That's great. That's really powerful that your parents, really proud of their heritage and everything, and it shaped you into who you are today. and the rest of your family as well. I just think it was really cool how like your cousin, everybody came down here, like they took the first step, and then seeing your family build that community like that, it's really, really powerful.
And one of the things that also told me, the interesting part is that my dad, when he came to the United States, the story is that he had $27 in his pocket. He came with a number and the name of a friend of his who was going to give him a place to stay. It was the year of the World's Fair. And his friend, he took a cab to his friend's house in Queens, and his friend had somebody else sleeping there that night. So he said, Ismael, you actually have to go and walk around a little bit because the person's not going to be here it's not going to leave till tomorrow. So my dad walked through Flushing Meadow and saw the World Fair and was just waiting until the next morning. He got a job right away because he was a machinist. And the story is that he could only order bacon and eggs for months because that was the only thing he knew how to say. But he also got himself in English classes. He got his GED here. He really reaped the benefits of all of the resources that he could access here in the United States. And then he brought my mother over 2 years after that.
That's great. Yeah, he really took like the advantages and everything to get where he needed to be. That's really powerful. I just want to go back to like your childhood. Was there like any moments or experiences that first made you aware of some of the challenges that like just families and just young people face in general?
Yeah. I would say that, I grew up in a home that was filled with love and opportunity, and I felt really capable as a young woman. And so even though I guess I would have identified as working class, I didn't understand what I had or didn't have because I felt that I had all of my basic needs met. However, whenever I traveled to other places or I went to Colombia, I realized that there were family members who did not have as much as I did. And even in New York, I realized there were communities that I was a part of that didn't have as much as I did. And that there were a lot of people that had meant much more than I did, but it was all relative to me. Like I wasn't necessarily calculating that until I got much older. And you look back at something, then it all makes sense to you. But I was really happy and I felt like I had everything I needed. And yet I remember a distinct moment in my life when I was working full time and I went to school full time, and I saw my parents work a lot. So this is the other thing. It wasn't like maybe we knew what to ask for, right? And so my parents were both working a lot, but I knew that they were overextended because not only were they supporting 4 kids, my parents would always send money back to support the families in Colombia. And again, seeing that very much part of their tradition. And so if I wanted things for myself, I had to be able to have a job. So I had lots of jobs. And when I was in my early 20s, I was working full time, going to school full time. I had part-time jobs, and I was coming home from school one day, and it was pouring raining. I was living in Jackson Heights. It was pouring raining, and many people hear me say this story, but it was pouring raining, and I was getting out of the train, and I'd just gotten these brand new shoes, and in my 20-year-old self, I felt really judgmental about this homeless man who was laying on the ground, and he had a puddle to the right of him, a puddle to his left of him, and all I could think about is I didn't want to mess up my shoes, right? And I was like, why do I have like 100 jobs and this man is just laying on the street, right? And when the man turns around, it's someone that I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And not only is it someone that I know, it's someone from my family, someone who I had just seen weeks later who I thought was fine. And little did I know that there were a series of events in his life that led him to be homeless on the street, HIV positive, and addicted to crack. And to me, that was a defining moment because I realized that sometimes you can have a series of events that just repeatedly happen: unemployment, a trauma in a relationship, displacement in a home. You can get sick. And then you can wind up homeless. Even if you have a community of brothers and sisters and cousins and a family that can envelop you, you could still wind up there. And that was mind-blowing to me. That was completely mind-blowing to me. And it was at that moment that I realized that I wanted to be part of the safety net and the connections that would make sure that someone like this person would never fall again, right? That would be important. And that if they fell, that I would be part of a system that would help them get up again and help them kind of recalibrate and re-engage. And not only that, that I would help them kind of think about ways to soar, to exceed, not just think about not having problems, not just thinking about not being homeless or not being addicted to drugs, but thinking about how could would have supported him to be his best self. Because sometimes we think about youth development, we think about problem-free is fully prepared, but it's not. Just because you don't have problems doesn't mean you're prepared. And what I knew about this young man who was my family was that he had a lot of problems, but he also never got to live to his potential.
Wow. I don't know if you could tell us, but like, what's going on with this person now?
That was the late 80s, early 90s. It was a crack epidemic. He died, unfortunately. He died of AIDS. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And there was a lot of ripple effects of his life and the way he lived it that impacted my family in very detrimental ways. But again, to me, that moment was pivotal in my understanding that the connective tissues and the connectivity to community is only one thing, and that another thing is when there are traumas, personal traumas, or when you lose a job, those connections can become very vulnerable and fragile.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I feel like, especially when we think about homeless people, I think a lot of people look down on them and everything, but like, I think people don't realize like that was somebody's child, like, like they probably, like, you don't know what other people are going through. And some people just be like, oh, like if this happened to me, I'm like, but like, you don't know.
Yeah.
Life is unfair, to be real with you. And like a lot of people don't know how to handle it properly or don't have the support. So
what happened to me after that incident was that I started to do some volunteer work. So at that time, I was a dancer for most of my young adult life, and that's what I thought I wanted to pursue. And I was going to college. I was going to Hunter College, and I was doing well, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. But that moment was so transformative that I said, I've got to figure out a pathway to figure out how to be part of an ecosystem that would help someone like him. And so I started to volunteer at Safe Space, which was, speaking of kind of homeless or unhoused young people, it was for gay, lesbian, transgender youth that were HIV positive. And so that was the kind of work that made me realize, to your point, like these are young people who are somebody's siblings. They're somebody's sons and daughters, somebody's children. And I think they needed to get services and receive help in ways that kept their dignity and humanity intact.
Right. Thank you for that. And so that was pretty much like the catalyst for like you wanting to pursue your career and everything. To add on to that, was there someone else in your life early on, like perhaps like a teacher or like a mentor? It could be another like a family member as well, who like really influenced your path towards helping others?
Yeah. I mean, I had a lot of people, like my parents were my first youth developers, and I saw the way, like I mentioned, saw the way they helped communities. And, my mother continues to do that. My father has passed since, but his whole life has been about serving others, as my mother has been as well. But I would say that there was a person at Hunter College. Her name was Dr. Elaine Walsh. And when I decided that I was going to take this path of service, I thought I was going to go to the Peace Corps. So I was like, I want to go to the Peace Corps and help, developing countries. And she said to me, I bumped into her in the hallway. She was like the head of urban planning, I believe. And she said, there's plenty of to do in New York City. And I was like, no, but I want to go to like some remote place and support. And so because of her influence, I embarked on a journey to work at the Liberty Partnership programs in the Rafael Cordero Bilingual School in East Harlem. And I was like, there is sure plenty to do here. And it was through that path that I started to look at kind of the intersection of social emotional development and education, and then thinking about really social work and how social work could really lead me to the types of impacts that I wanted to make across multiple settings. So I would say she was like, nope, there's places to be here. And then I would say the other person was this woman by the name of Sister Geraldine. She was the executive director of the Center for Family Life. And she was very interesting because I had my internships. I went to Columbia University School of Social Work once I decided that I was going to actually pursue a career in social work. And I had my first internship there, and I didn't have an exact caseload at that point because I'd come in the middle of the year. And so I got to watch this woman work like in her work. I got to shadow her for 2 weeks. And she taught me, she believed in the constellation of family, children, youth, and families, that you're building all together, and that they're kind of, it's a reciprocal, that when you develop young people, you're also developing families. And when you're developing families, you're developing communities, and that exchange is really critical. But what I learned from her was that she said, figure out what you want to say and what you want to do. And then no matter where you go, you've got to say it repeatedly. So this idea of message and purpose, I saw her do that with city council members. I saw her do that in the Beacons. I saw her do that with her team. But this continuity of purpose and continuity of message was something that I learned from her. And then later on, I had other people as well. Reverend Alfonso Wyatt was very instrumental to my growth and development as a youth worker, really pushing me to think about what does it mean to serve, to be a servant leader, and what does it mean to help build the field and the cadre of leaders that are coming after me.
That's great. Shout out to them.
Yeah, shout out to them. It's true.
So when you first started working in the field of like social work, what surprised you the most about like the realities of it?
What I found like shocking in a beautiful way, because I had seen some things before I went to the School of Social Work that made me numb. And again, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s during the crack and AIDS epidemic. And I was very much entrenched in organizations where that was alive. And so there wasn't a lot that shocked me in terms of the devastation, but what was beautifully surprising was witnessing the resiliency of the human spirit and witnessing the will of people to want to help each other. So early on in my career, I just worked with extraordinary social workers who were in it for the work, who really wanted to help support children, youth, and families to succeed and thrive. And so I was always just in awe from that. But also I had seen young people and families go through things that could break someone, and instead, they used it as the catalyst to build and to grow and to flourish. And that to me was really humbling because, as a social worker, you think you're going to do all this thing, but I was transformed. I was transformed witnessing their greatness. I was transformed witnessing their resilience. And that stays with me, right? And so, that stays with me.
Looking back on your career, what were some of the key moments or like opportunities that push you towards leadership roles?
Mm-hmm. I think my career grew organically, not necessarily intentionally. Like I just feel like I'm aligned with purpose, and so that incident that I gave you that happened in Jackson Heights in the 80s and 90s, that set the pace for me and the tone for what I wanted to do. And it just so happened that I always worked hard. I had great mentors, and opportunities always presented themselves to me. I think I only interviewed for. I don't think I ever interviewed for jobs. I think people always recruited me and said, we're interested in you coming to work with us.
Wow.
And so that's been always wonderful. And the truth is that I was recruited very early in my career to take on leadership roles and director roles, and that I refused because I was a bilingual social worker, which at the time was a hot commodity. And I really was dedicated in honing my craft because I wanted to be able to occupy leadership spaces from a place of knowing and a place of preparedness, as opposed to just being put in there and being like, what exactly am I doing? So I really took seriously my supervision and my mentorship. And then as I honed my skills, these opportunities just emerged for me.
That's great. Yeah. So it seemed like you had like a lot of the experience already, and it just led to where you are now as our commissioner. And did you ever imagine that one day you'd be leading DYCD? Like, what does that journey like look like for you? Did you ever think about it or see it as a reality? Like,
it was not on my bingo card. It just wasn't. It was just not something that I pursued. As a matter of fact, people had asked me in prior administrations if I would ever consider being a commissioner. I was like, absolutely not. I get fired on day 2, only because I had this idea of city government that was very kind of strict or restrictive, and that I couldn't necessarily say what I believed. I mean, that's not entirely true, but that was my perception of it. But also, I also thought I would be on the provider side for the rest of my career. And so, except there were 2 times where I had windows where I was like, that would be interesting. I had a meeting with Jeannie Mulgrave, the commissioner of DYCD, how many years ago now? I mean, decades ago.
Before my time.
Yeah.
Way
2
before
or
my
3
time. Yeah.
commissioners ago. And she was with her chief of staff, Lisette Nieves, and I saw these 2 women of color powerhouses. And I was meeting with them when I was at the Youth Development Institute. And I saw myself like, wow, if I wanted that, these are 2 powerhouse women that are doing things that I could potentially do. So that representation mattered to me. That was like the first time. And the second time was when I saw Ana Bermudez, who was the commissioner at the Department of Probation, and I saw her, and she was talking about youth development, and she was talking about reform, and I was like, wow, I could, if I wanted to, I could, because representation matters as a young woman of color early in my career. Had I not had those glimpses, maybe I wouldn't have said yes, or I wouldn't even had it part of like in my conscious or subconscious to retrieve those images and saying, yes, this is possible for people that look like me, that believe the things that I believe, and that want the things that I want for children, youth, and families.
Yeah, that's really important representation.
Yes.
Yeah, because I feel like, I mean, I'm sure there's younger women of color may be looking up to you now and taking inspiration from you. So, it's like a cycle
I hope so.
in a sense. Yeah.
I hope so.
I'm sure they are. Now that you're commissioner, how do you stay grounded in the real experiences of the young people and communities that DYCD serves?
Yeah. I mean, I'm in week 8, I think. So I still feel very much connected to my prior work as a provider. But to continue to do that is I have to be able to go on site visits, to talk to practitioners, to talk to young people directly, and to hear firsthand how they experience their communities and how we as an organization could better support them. So that's going to be core to the work that I do. And also just making sure that I have people around me who are helping me check my blind spots. Because sometimes we have narratives about young people and communities that if you are around people that think like you, it's an echo chamber. So I really am committed to pushing myself to be around people who think differently than I do, who are willing to share their expertise and knowledge and push my assumptions. And to be around young people too, right? Like I think my daughters, I have a 21-year-old, I have a 12-year-old. Every time I think something's hip or like the next thing that needs to be solved, they're like, Mom, that was like so last year. But also listening to a 12-year-old about what she's navigating in middle school, or a 21-year-old, what she's navigating in college, it gives me perspective.
Yeah, it keeps you like updated,
Yes.
with what's going on and everything.
Yes.
So that's
listening
really
to
good.
music that young people listening to, being on the social platforms that they're on to see what they're being exposed to. All of those things are really critical.
Right. Another question I have for you in regards to young people. So for young people listening who might be interested in social work or like organizing community or public service, what advice would you give them about building a career that centers impact? What advice would you give them?
Yeah. I think there is a lot of pressure for young people to know what they want to do.
Yeah.
And so I think my general advice is like, I think it's really important for young people to expose themselves to multiple things. And so again, as I mentioned, when I was young, I had a lot of part-times, jobs and full-time jobs. I worked at a women's clinic. I worked at a law firm. I worked at a bank. I worked at a real estate agency. I had a lot of jobs, and then I did volunteering as well. And I think it's important, no matter what you do, and I'll go into about public service, notice what moves you. Like, notice what breathes life into your heart, into your soul, because that's where you're going to get the most energy and the most traction in your career. So, and so I say that even in public service, we have ideas about what that looks like. What does it mean to serve? And it could be as a social worker, but you could be doing exactly what you are. You're interviewing me right now and you're still giving to your community, right?
Right.
You don't have to be in the front lines. You can be in the back. You can, the sector has a range of opportunities. And sometimes we only think about social work, or we think about like teachers, or we think about public officials. And I'm saying, if you want to serve, think about the range of opportunities and notice what moves you. And then shadow people. If you see someone in a space and you're like, I wonder what they do, I want to be around them, it looks like the kind of job that I'm interested in, ask to shadow them and create those experiences. And this is the most important advice. If you go down a path and you realize that you don't want to do it, don't. Because the worst thing we do is that we continue to pursue things that don't fill us. And make a U-turn and change your mind and saying, I want to do it differently. Not because it's hard, because I want people to push through even if it's hard, but if it doesn't feel right and it doesn't call you and it doesn't feel like it's your purpose, make a U-turn.
That's really like great advice, especially for like young people. I feel like a lot of them, get into careers, like they follow what somebody else might want them to do, but not exactly what they want to do.
Yeah.
And I also think like experience is the best teacher.
Exactly.
So I feel like, once people are more exposed to all of that, then they're able to figure out what they want. So I think, yeah.
And we can have more than one thing that we do in life, right? So like I was working as a social worker. I worked as an executive leader. I was also an executive coach. I also taught yoga. I did aerobics. Like I did a lot of things.
You was a dancer.
Yeah, I was a dancer.
Things. Yeah.
All at the same time. And even
Exactly.
now, like I don't think that it's actually that we have one path. We have multiple paths. Right now I'm thinking about like what would it mean to I have a lot of other interests. I have interest in poetry. I have interest in, I had a cleaning, I was a cleaning organizing specialist while I was also a social worker. So I would help people organize their lives. So I had this whole cleaning business that I had on the side. So we have this idea that we can only do one career, but it could branch off into a lot of things. And I'm not encouraging like, working to the point of no joy. I'm saying if there are other things that bring you joy, then you should be doing it as well.
Yeah. And sometimes it just takes time. Maybe you need to focus on one thing for right now.
Yes.
But other opportunities can come and you just build alongside that, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I feel like maybe I want to write a book or start a hair line. I don't know. I have many more careers in me.
Next thing you know, after commissioner, new hairline.
You never know.
Like,
I'll write a book on
like,
leadership. Who knows? I'm just saying, this is what I say to anybody, especially people, no matter how, like young people who are going in or people who are like me later on in their career. What if we imagine that the best learning and growth is ahead of us, not behind us? What would we do?
I hope all the kids are listening right now because that is really good advice. I think everybody needs to hear. So thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. What are some goals you hope to accomplish? I know it's only been 8 weeks, but like, what are some goals you hope to accomplish as commissioner of DYCD? And like, what is your future for that?
Thank you for saying that I've only been here 8 weeks because I just found out where the bathroom was and that we all have the same code. No, but seriously, I think that DYCD is run by really extraordinary people. Probably the most committed and devoted staff that I have met. And I am not a stranger to DYCD because as a provider, I have grown up with many of the deputy commissioners and staff for over the last 25 years. And my hope is to continue to build on all the great work that we've done. So as commissioner, I've been doing a lot of thinking about what do I want to do more of, less of, or differently. And I'm in the thick of kind of trying to figure that out. But there are a few things that I'm certain. I'm certain that I work with a group and a team of people who are dedicated and committed. And so I want to keep on supporting them to do a lot of what they are doing really well. I also want us to challenge us as an agency to think about how we want to increase our impact in communities and align what we do with the mayor's vision of creating a more safe, equitable, and affordable New York. So I want to make sure that we figure out concretely what that's going to look like. And when I think about our work, I think about the side of us that is kind of dedicated to contracting. So I want to prioritize making sure that providers get paid on time. And then I also want to make sure that we are stabilizing the field, right? Like, I think there is this desire always to innovate and to imagine differently. But I think when you do that from a place of stability, that's where power lies. And I've been just curious about, we have this great expansion happening with the Compass RFP, which is wonderful because it's about access and getting more kids to participate in a really good opportunity, and it really helps families at large. And I keep wondering around the expansion of Compass, but what does that look like for agencies that run Beacons and Cornerstones and SYPs and Runaway Homeless Youth and our community development programs, our literacy programs? Those contracts have been outdated. And so I think we need to figure out how to raise the floor for those contracts while simultaneously thinking about, so it's stabilization and as well as expansion. And so I'm trying to really lean into that. And when I think about stabilization, I'm not just thinking about the contracts and what that would do for providers, but I'm also thinking about, DYCD has grown exponentially over the last decade. We went from a $250 million organization to a $1.6 billion organization, and we haven't necessarily grown our backbone. And so what would it look like to stabilize that a little bit and to think about what we can accomplish from a place of real equilibrium?
Before we end the episode, is there anything else you'd like to say? Any final thoughts or advice or any words you'd like to give or shout outs?
Yeah, I would say that, one of the most interesting parts about being commissioner is right now is the deference that I get from folks. And people are like, very much accommodating and very much kind of wanting to support my vision. And I think that what I want to be known is I'm only going to be as good as my team and as the provider community. So I am welcoming feedback. I want people to challenge me in this space. I don't have all the answers, and I'm not the smartest person in the room. And I do believe in my heart and soul that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and that if we work together and collectively, that we are going to achieve so much more for children, youth, and families in this great city.
Well said. Thank you so much for that, Commissioner. And yep, that concludes today's discussion. So for more information on DYCD, check out nyrc.gov/DYCD. Or be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Join us again next month for another episode of DYCD Next Gen. Once again, I'm your host, Ryan Cooks, and thank you all for listening. Thank you, Commissioner, for being on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan.